Okay, well, welcome to our COVID-19 support webinar, our second one of this week, talking about the job retention scheme, government grants for employers to furloughed employees. This has been updated again on the 5th of November following. For any of you that listened to our webinar on Tuesday, the 2nd, there are 4 things that have changed from that webinar. And so to speed up your review of this webinar, I'm going to just go through those 4 things in isolation now. So the 4 things that have changed since Rishi got up and spoke earlier on this week are as follows. Firstly, the job retention scheme has now been extended beyond the 4-week lockdown period up to 31st of March 2020. So we're now looking at a job retention scheme that will run to 31st of March 2020. Second thing that's changed, I was talking about the fact that you would get a £1,000 grant for every employee that you'd furloughed and still retained on the 31st of January. That should read 2021. That's now postponed, and in fact it may be cancelled altogether. So no £1,000 grant on 31st of December, 31st of January 2021. Third thing that's changed, the self-employed income support scheme, payment number 3. On Tuesday it was at 55% to a maximum figure of £5,160. It's now here Friday, it's now been increased to 80% and a maximum figure of £7,500 available as a third payment to any self-employed person suffering from the effects of their business suffering from the effects of COVID-19. And the fourth and final thing that's an adjustment from Tuesday's webinar, Bounce Back and SEISS loans have now been extended to 31st of January 2021. They were due to end on 30th of November 2020. So they're the 4 things that have changed since Tuesday. Now running through what we covered on Tuesday. First of all, can my business remain open after the 4th of November 2020? Well, now we're on the 5th of November 2020, and I suspect that anyone who's running a business now knows whether their business can remain open or not. I've listed out the various. Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, I think we've got someone not on mute at the moment. Tom, can you sort that out? That's okay. It should be okay. I've listed out the various businesses that can remain open and those that are closed. It's not as obvious as it looks. Certainly this week we've had a few clients questioning whether they can remain open or not, and some it's quite difficult to find the answers. The answer seems to be go to your local council if you're not sure. I had a card shop that was questioning whether they were essential or not. Obviously, you could consider them essential if you want to send a birthday card during lockdown. Certainly if you go to a supermarket or a garden centre, you can buy gift cards and birthday cards there. There was a question whether they could remain open or not, especially if they also sold newspapers. That question, eventually we couldn't find it in the legislation, so the answer to that question was go to your local council and ask them whether you can remain open or not. But I've left you the lists of businesses that can and can't remain open on the screen there. Now, what's happened with the job retention scheme? Well, it was due to end on 31st of October 2020 and be replaced by the job support scheme, but lockdown has changed all of that. There is now no need for me to go into the job support scheme as it's been postponed perhaps indefinitely, and the job retention scheme, which was due to run for a 4-week lockdown period, has now yesterday been extended by Rishi, and it is now going to run to 31st of March 2021. So we're looking at the ability to furlough employees right the way through to 31st of March 2021. The current rules, which have now changed from the 1st of November, are in fact pretty much the same as they were in August 2020. So it's now the government will fund 80% of the employer's cost, but they will not fund the employer's national insurance or the pension contributions. This is better than it was in September, where the government were funding 70% and the employer funding 10%, and October, where the government were only funding 60% and the employer funding 20%. So we're now back up to 80% government funded, but the employer must fund national insurance and pension. The next time that the government intend to look at these rates, they now say are in January, so we can probably assume that these rates will stick for the whole of November, the whole of December, and perhaps even the whole of January. So that's where we are at the moment with that. Where do we find all the guidance on this? Well, I've given you the links there to the guidance on the gov.uk site. There's also a news story that came out on 31st of October when the lockdown was announced, and I've given you the link to that. Please bear in mind that the guidance is not the legislation. This is just the guidance the government and HMRC issue around the offerings that are being put forward, and that is then turned into legislation. So we are still waiting for certain parts of this to turn into real legislation, which is enforceable in law. So you must read the guidance just as that as guidance. Right, now going on to the job retention scheme itself, the extension. A short summary of that. Well, the job retention scheme is, as I said before, pretty much the same as August 2020's scheme. That's 80% funded by the employer, 80% funded by the government. The employer pays NIC and pension. Can I just move something back here to see? And now it's available for anybody who was on the payroll on or before the 30th of October 2020. So before the end of last month, there was a need to have been on the payroll in March, been furloughed. Those rules have now gone, and you are only looking at employees, are they on the payroll on the 30th of October 2020? It can apply now to employees whether they've been furloughed in the past or not. So this opens up lots of new claims that can be made because we've got no restrictions on employees apart from the fact that they were on the payroll on the 30th of October 2020. As I said before, employees will receive 80% of their wages up to a limit of £2,500, and the government will fund that. The employers will need to pay the national insurance and pension contributions on those wages. Employees can be flexible furloughed as they could in the last few months. So that means they can work part-time and be furloughed the rest of the time. Employers, first of all, who is eligible for the job retention scheme? Well, it's basically all employers with a UK bank account and a UK PAYE scheme. They can claim the grant. Neither the employer nor the employee needs to have previously used the previous job retention scheme. So this is open to new employers that might have started up in the summer. The government expects public funded organisations not to use the scheme. This probably doesn't apply to very many businesses, but if, for example, you were a nursery, you may well have received public funding towards your fees, and you would use that rather than the job retention scheme to make your claims. I won't go into that because it's very specific to certain businesses. Employees, who's eligible? Well, to be eligible as an employee under this extension, you must have been on the employer's payroll by 23:59, so it's 11:59 in the evening on the 30th of October 2020. What this actually means is a real-time information submission notifying payment for that employee to HMRC must have been made on or before the 30th of November 2020, 11:59 in the evening. So it looks like you're okay if you hired staff in October, submitted the RTI submission on Friday the 30th of October, and then paid the staff on the last day of the month on Saturday the 31st of October. But you're not okay if you didn't submit that RTI submission in time. Are all employees eligible? Yes, this is full-time, part-time employees, employees on agency contracts, or employees on flexible or 0 hours contracts. Flexible furlough, as I said before, is also permitted, and there's a need to establish, but if there's flexible furlough, there's a need to establish, as there was before, your usual hours and your actual hours. And this is a particular problem for directors who probably haven't got an employment contract setting out their usual hours, and their actual hours could be any time during the day or night. So flexible furlough, as we've been saying to our clients over quite a long time, is quite difficult to prove if you are if you're a director. So I'm just going to give you a summary of what support is being provided for employer costs. We're saying 80% of wages up to a cap of £2,500. That must be paid to an employee in full. So if you're going to receive furlough money, you must pay it onto the employee in full. Employers will pay the employer's national insurance and pension contributions. Employers will also have to pay a top-up if they choose to top up the wages above 80%. So if you choose to pay your employee 100% rather than 80%, then it's for the employer to pay that top-up, and the employers have to pay the working time that the employee works. There's no furlough for time when the employee works. So the government are going to shortly tell us when we can put in claims for November, and we're expecting that to be around the 14th of November. So it should be that you can collect your money for paying the November salary before you have to pay it at the end of November. I'm just going to go back to directors and furlough, because this was a topic of discussion on Tuesday, and is quite important to make sure that you stay the right side of the law if you are a director and you are trying to furlough yourself. We have in the past spoken about the fact that technically a director can be furloughed, but when you are furloughed, you must not carry out any services or fee-paying work except for your statutory duties as a director. You can't do anything work related. All you can do is your statutory duties, perhaps sign off accounts and that sort of thing. The subsidy is based on your PAYE salary alone, so it's not based on your dividends, as you probably found out already when furlough claims have gone in for you if you're a director making furlough claims. This is just 80% of your salary, which may be set at £700 or £800, and you'll get an 80% of that. HMRC have confirmed that directors can be furloughed, and they did that back in March. Now, flexible furlough is difficult for directors. As I said before, it's quite difficult to identify your usual working hours and your actual working hours. If you can do that, if you have got an employment contract that sets out your usual hours, and they're the hours you work to, and you can record down your actual hours, then technically it's possible to flexi furlough yourself and claim part furlough and part non-furlough. But for us, I think we haven't found very many directors that can really prove they're flexibly furloughed. For us, directors are either furloughed in full and doing nothing at all for their business apart from their statutory duties, or they're not furloughed at all and they're working for their wages with no claim for furlough. Now on to a few questions we've had during the last few days. First question, what do I need to do to furlough my employees? Well, HMRC states to be eligible for the subsidy, employers should write to their employees confirming that they've been furloughed and keep a record of this communication. So some of you may have used our original templates we issued back in March when furlough started, and you may still be using those. Since that time, ACAS have issued a number of useful templates supported by their legal team rather than the PJCO attempt at these letters. And I've given you the link there to ACAS's website, where you can search for the furlough letter template. So there are furlough letters for all of the occasions that you need to write to your employees to start them on furlough, to extend the furlough, to end the furlough. Those templates are all available on the ACAS site, and you can amend them to suit your business. Question number 2, my employees were moving on to the job support scheme. What now? Well, as I said before, the job support scheme will not now start on the 1st of November. In my notes here, I say it's likely to commence at the end of the 4-week lockdown period, but in fact now it's not likely to commence until at least the 31st of March. I think if you were moving people onto the job support scheme, then you would need to write to them now, explaining the changes, and getting their agreement to be furloughed under whatever circumstances you want them furloughed from the 1st of November. So that could be flexi furlough or it could be complete furlough. As I say, use the templates provided by ACAS to get those letters in place. The government have confirmed there's no gap in eligibility between the job retention scheme that it was due to end on 31st of October and this extension, even though the lockdown started on the 4th of November. The job retention scheme effectively just carries on. Another question we've had, I've never used the job retention scheme, can I use it now? Yes, you can use the job retention scheme now. You can ignore all the old rules dating back to March and June in terms of your employees. If you've got a PAYE scheme and your employees are on the payroll on the 30th of October 2020, if you remember with the RTI submission made for those employees, then you can furlough them from the 1st of November. If they weren't on that RTI submission, then you can't furlough them according to the guidance. Of course, the law might change some of this when we go forwards, because it does seem a bit odd that, you know, a lot of employers may well have done their October payroll on the 31st of October, not the 30th of October. So there might be scope for the legislation to slightly change that. Question, what can you as the employer claim for? Well, I've gone through this. This is 80% of employees' regular salary up to a maximum of £2,500. Remembering that the employer must pay employers' national insurance, which can be up to 13.8%, employers' pension, which could be 3%, and working time and top-up the employer must pay. That employers' national insurance and pension, on average, although national insurance could be 13.8%, I think when we look across our clients, on average, this is equated to about 5% of the wage cost, because there are starting limits for both these to come in. So the employer is, if they're paying the 80% furlough, they're probably paying 5% on average on top of that. What if I've made my employees redundant or they're on their notice period? Well, you can bring back employees that you made redundant since the 23rd of September 2020. If they're on notice, you really need to consider employment law and the individual's employee position. By using the job retention scheme, you may be able to support their employment for a longer time and potentially avoid redundancy. Then you should be able to extend their notice period during November. But this is going to be with the aim of potentially reinstating them into their roles. Now, you may well find that some employees don't want to be furloughed and their notice periods extended. They may want their redundancy now, so you really do need to talk to the employees if you're intended to do this. You really need to speak to those employees if you're intended to do that. Can employees still work while on the job retention scheme? Well, yes, flexible furlough is available, but you need to pay the employee their usual pay for the hours they work and only claim furlough for the hours they don't work. Employees can, assuming your contract allows them, also work elsewhere where they're on furlough. It's perfectly possible to go off and get a job somewhere else while you're on furlough. What about employee shielding? You can furlough employee shielding if you want to. Employees classed as clinically vulnerable will have received a letter probably now from the NHS telling them that's the case, and they will have been told during lockdown to minimise contact with other people. If you're not going to furlough these employees, then it is possible to claim statutory sick pay for those employees, I think for a maximum of 2 weeks. The NHS website has a list of all the conditions which would be classed as clinically vulnerable or clinically extremely vulnerable. How do I claim the job retention scheme? Well, you carry on claiming through the online portal as before. If you're a PJCO client, then it's generally been us putting in those claims for you, and we will continue to do that over the next few months. HMRC, please do remember, HMRC retain the right to retrospectively audit all aspects of your claim. So make sure you're keeping all the adequate records that support your claims. So you must keep those records of usual hours and working hours, furlough agreements, signed letters from the employee, end of furlough letters. All of those letters must be kept because HMRC will come back, or may well come back, and audit your figures to check your claims. I will go on to this a bit later on. What else can I claim in addition to the job retention scheme? Well, in addition to the job retention scheme, I think we found 8 further claims that a business may want to claim. And these 8 claims I'm going to go through in detail in a little while. But before I do that, I will just see if we've got any questions on the job retention scheme itself. So any questions on the job retention scheme at this stage? If you've got any, just switch your microphone off and ask, please.
Peter, it's Gabrielle here.
Hi, Gabrielle.
Hi, sorry, I joined the call slightly late. I just wanted to double check because obviously with the extension of furlough to the end of March now,
yeah.
Has the government actually changed the qualifying number of days that you've got to be put on furlough before you, can change it to flexi furlough or whatever?
Well, it's 7 days is the number of days that you need to be on furlough. Yeah, you need to be on furlough for a minimum of 7 days. Now, it could be flexible furlough or full furlough, but your period must run for at least 7 days.
Got you. And does that include people that are currently on furlough?
Yeah, if they're already on furlough, then I think their 7 days will have already started.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I've had people on furlough in the intervening previous month since it started, because it's been continuous up until the end of October, do those people qualify for flexi furlough and they don't have to do the 7 days qualifier?
I think that if they're on furlough already, they will have already done 7 days furlough. So you could put them on flexi furlough, or you could bring them back to work. I mean, the slight difficulty, Gabrielle, in the legislation isn't written yet. If you wanted to be ultra careful, you would make sure that they were still on furlough or flexi furlough until at least 7 days into this month.
Got you.
At least tomorrow. But the legislation on that isn't written yet. There's a few bits that are still what we're waiting for all the detail on. I mean, all they've said at the moment is that the minimum period of claim is 7 days. Now, if you've been on furlough already, that would sound like it would be part of those 7 days. I think what they're trying to cover is you just putting someone on furlough for a day or two and then taking them off and bringing them back to work. That would cover, but as long as the period's been at least 7 days, then it's fully covered.
Okay, so any employees that have not been on furlough before with our company and we now wish to put them on furlough, we would need to do the 7 initial days on furlough. I've got you. I thought they may have put it up to 21, you know, pro rata to the amount of time that they're extending the furlough, but glad to hear that it's still
7 days.
7 days. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, Peter, we've got just one question about as a director of a limited company, if you're furloughed, can you do any marketing whilst on furlough?
Can you do any marketing whilst on furlough? I think as long as you're not creating fee earning work, so, you know, going and seeing, it depends what you call marketing, doesn't it? Going and seeing a potential sale, I would say was part of your job as a director. I keep warning directors that, you know, this is a place where HMRC may well come back. Both the government and HMRC don't like, as they proved by not giving any support to salary, dividend, director shareholders. They haven't offered any support at all to those people on a combination of salary and dividend. They clearly don't like that route. They can't do anything about it, it appears, but they don't like it. And when they come to look at these furlough claims in the future, maybe one place they will look is director-only companies furloughing themselves, because it might be quite easy for them to get, and it's going to be relatively small amounts of money, because, you know, you're generally only claiming £500 or £600 a month from it. But they may well be able to go back and prove that those directors were working, especially as there's no one really to check that they weren't. You're writing a letter to yourself, and you're policing yourself. So I would be, as I say, I would be careful, very careful. If I was a director and I was furloughed, I would either make sure there is no hope of me doing anything. So, you know, I could see a director of a cafe that's closed down at the moment, or events management that's closed down, then clearly they're going to be furloughed because there is nothing they can do. But if it's a director of a company that potentially could be trading, I'd be careful about the way I operated during that time, to make sure I could prove to HMRC I was doing no fee paying or work that could be construed in any way, shape or form to be fee paying. And as I say, some marketing, going and seeing a sales contact, might be construed that way.
Peter, got one other question for you. If we do initial furlough letters out to people and say, you know, it's for the next month, do we have to do a letter each time we extend it for the next month, or will an email suffice with them confirming they accept the extension of furlough?
I think that the email will suffice if they've done it. You know, if you've explained to them that's how you're going to do in the initial letter, if you've explained to them that's how you're going to do it going forwards, and obviously there's the ability to end it or extend it. You've explained that that's how it would work going forwards, then I think an email will suffice. I don't think necessarily all the employees want a separate letter every month or every time you need to extend it. If you've got an email agreement, that should be okay.
Super.
But it is important you've got that documentation in the background in one way or another, whether it's email, whether it's letters. Yes. I think the initial furlough agreement ought to go out as a letter, because it's really a change to the contract of employment for all intents and purposes. So it ought to go out in the way you would ordinarily send out changes to your contracts of employment.
Super. Thank you.
Are we done with job retention scheme queries? Sounds like it. Okay, so we're going to go on to the other claims that could be made by a business at the moment. So obviously the first one is furlough via the job retention scheme. I did say there, don't forget £1,000 per employee if they're still employed on 31st of January 2021. Well, that now has gone. Rishi postponed that when he spoke, I think it was yesterday. And so we don't know whether that's going to be back in March or April or sometime in the future, or whether it's gone altogether and there is no incentive to retain employees going forward. So we don't know that at the moment. Not that necessarily the £1,000 grant was an incentive to retain employees when furlough was ending in October. Second thing that potentially can be claimed, business grants for business rates payers. This is claimed from your local council, and all of these 8 that I've got here, I'm going to go through in a bit more detail in a moment. So business grants for business rates payers, if you're on that list, just remember you may be able to claim. Number 3, this is more for individuals, but it's still there. Remember, mortgage holidays are available. You can claim mortgage holidays on your mortgage for a period of up to 6 months. And this has been now extended for a further 6 months. So if you haven't claimed yet, you could claim for 6 months without it affecting your credit rating. Or if you have claimed, you're able to keep claiming through to your 6-month period. Number 4, discretionary business grants. These are available from your local council for businesses that are non-business rates payers. So if you haven't got business premises and you're not paying business rates, you may be able to get a discretionary business grant from your local council. We've had a few businesses have success with this. Number 5, which I suspect most people have now at least claimed one of these 2, bounce back loans or CBILS. This was currently due to end at the end of end of November. It's now due to end not on the 3rd of January, but actually on the 31st of January 2021. So those have been extended on. Bounce back loans are still available to be claimed up until the end of January 2021, as are CBILS. So if you haven't put in one of those claims, you might want to look at that, and I'll come on to that in a moment. Number 6, the self-employed income support scheme. You will have, if you've claimed under this, you will have received 2 payments through this year, and the 3rd payment is due on or around the 14th of December, and that's covering the period from November to January 2021. This was at 55% on Tuesday when I did this presentation, and now Rishi has made it more generous and increased it to 80%, which means you could claim a maximum of £7,500 as your 3rd payment for the self-employed income support scheme. And that could have meant, so far you've had 3 lots of 7,500, and under the scheme at the moment, it looks like there could be 4 payments of this to happen, because the 4th period from February to April is also included in this scheme, but we don't know how much that will be at the moment. Number 7, Kickstart and apprenticeship schemes. Funding is available if you want to take on new apprentices. There is funding for their wages, as well as funding as grants for taking on new apprentices. I'll go on to the Kickstart scheme in a little while. And then number 8, tax deferral schemes. There have been a number of tax deferral schemes across the time that the COVID crisis has been running. Obviously, one of the largest was the VAT, your VAT quarter between March and June. You were able to postpone that payment. You had to submit your VAT return, but you didn't have to make the payment. And that payment was due to be paid in March 2021. Well, in fact, now that has been extended still further, and you can pay it across in 12 equal instalments until March 2022. Second tax deferral scheme or second largest tax deferral scheme we've seen with our clients, self-employed second payment on account. So if you were due to pay under self-assessment a payment on account in July, you were able to postpone that payment, and now it's due in January 2021. It may well be, as we're in the position we are now, that it may well be extended still further than that, but the July 2020 second payment on account was postponed to Jan 2021. There is something to consider in the background here. There's some changes in insolvency law, as HMRC will become what's called a preferred creditor on the 1st of December 2020. So this means that HMRC will get paid before most other creditors after December 2020, and that might have a knock-on effect to some business owners if they go bust or go into liquidation after December 2020. Now, running on to these schemes in a bit more detail. The business grant scheme, you apply to your local council if you're a business rates payer, even if you have small business rates relief and you pay nothing at all. If you get a business rates bill and it shows nil, then you're entitled to these grants, and the grants are as follows. So for properties with a rateable value of under £15,000, grants of £1,334 per month or £667 every 2 weeks is available if your business is closed due to a local, or in fact now a national restriction. So with the national lockdown, if you close your business, you're entitled to claim £667 every 2 weeks from your local council if your business rates are under, a rateable value is under 15,000. If your rateable value is between 15,000 and 51,000, then grants of £2,000 a month, payable in 2 weekly instalments, £1,000 each 2 weeks, are payable if you're forced to close. And for rateable values above 51,000, that grant goes up to £3,000 a month, or £1,500 for every 2 weeks. There's another little summary of that. If you're not sure where you find your rateable value, look on your last or latest business rates bill. The rateable value will show there. To make these claims, as I say, you've got to apply to your local council, go onto their website, and there'll be a place to claim the business grant for being closed. Mortgage holidays, these were due to end on 31st of October. Borrowers who've been impacted by coronavirus and have not yet taken a payment holiday will be entitled to take a 6-month payment holiday, and those who have already started will be able to top up to 6 months without this being recorded on your credit file. I said the FCA are due to announce further information on this on Monday the 2nd of November. They may well have announced that now, but I just haven't seen it. But in basic terms, if you are struggling and you need a mortgage holiday, then you can take up to 6 months holiday from your mortgage. Although it's not affecting your credit file, we are finding that it is making a difference to some people when they go back to renegotiate their mortgage. Suddenly the best rates aren't available to people who are taking mortgage holidays. They're put on a higher risk profile. So it's not free, that 6-month holiday. There could be some problems going forwards for you. Discretionary grants to non-business rates payers. So this is if you haven't got some business premises. There are funds available. The government made funds available to local councils to support these businesses, and we have had a few businesses that have made successful claims. Grant route. Again, you home, you may well be route. So you may as well have a go and apply. If you aren't collecting anywhere else, have a go and apply. There's also funding to make your business COVID secure and safety costs, and certainly we've had quite a few businesses that have been able to collect funding for putting up those screens in front of the tills at the shop and that sort of thing. There's a complete list of grants online available at the link I've put there at the bottom of this page, grantsonline.org.uk/coronavirus. there's a complete list of all the grants you might be able to claim. So if you're feeling bored one day, have a look at that list and see if there's anything that might enable you to make a claim. Let's go now, move on to the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme. This has been extended, as I said, to a third payment and a fourth payment. So the third payment covers November to January 2021, and we now know it's at 80% of your average earnings. If you've made claims before, then you're going to be entitled to this again. If your business is affected by coronavirus between November and January 2021. And it's been pretty difficult to find a business that isn't affected by coronavirus during the lockdown. So if you've had claims under the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme, you've had your 2 claims so far, then you should get your third claim, and remember to put in that claim around the 14th of December 2020. You have to put in that claim the same as you did before. We can't do that for you, unfortunately. But it's pretty straightforward to do. HMRC have all the figures, you just have to put your details in. So the extension, that's going to last for 6 months. It's going to run from November to April. 2 payments, as I say, first one in December, next one 3 months later. We now know the first one, or the third payment, or the first one of the extension, is going to be 80% of average monthly trading profits. Paid out in a single instalment, and that's capped at £7,500 in total. So this is the idea of this, is it means that the self-employed are being protected around the same way as employees who are furloughed. The second grant, which is going to cover February to April, we don't know the level of that grant at the moment. We don't know if it will stay at 80% or it'll go down. If we look at what this current third grant was supposed to be before last week, this was supposed to be 40% of average monthly profits. So if things have got better, it may well be that that grant will go down for the February to April period. One thing to bear in mind, because now your grants could well be going into £20,000 or so. You must bear in mind that these grants are taxable. They become part of your earned income, or your self-employed income for the year to 5th of April 2021. And they are subject to tax and self-employed national insurance contributions. So it's not as if you get this money and never have to pay anything back. It may well be that what it will mean that you've got to pay tax on these monies. Bounce back loans and SEISS loans. The scheme was due to end on 30th of November, and now it's been extended to 31st of January. Additionally, if you did one bounce back loan and you want to top it up because you need more money, then you can top up that bounce back loan. And similarly, you can look at your coronavirus, your CBILS loans. Now with CBILS, probably you put in the only one you are going to put in. But if you haven't put in either of these, then you ought to look. Bounce back loans are limited to £50,000 in total, or 25% of your average turnover, your average sales. CBILS can cover much larger amounts. Now, there is a problem in that most banks had virtually stopped giving bounce back loans, and I think if you try and apply for one today, it's very difficult to find a bank that's accepting new applications. So if you are thinking of this, it's worthwhile starting to hunt around the banks to find out who will actually accept the application. Given the extensions there now, it should be that banks will start to increase their capacity to accept these. Bounce backs, as I say, can be up to £50,000 and can have a top up to get to that if your turnover is high enough. If you need more than £50,000, then CBILS might be your answer. And if you need to put in a CBILS loan, there's a lot more involved in a CBILS loan than a bounce back loan. Bounce back loan is simply filling out the form and getting your money. CBILS, there's a need to prove how you're going to use this money and how you're going to repay it, because unlike the bounce back loans, which are 100% guaranteed by the government, the CBILS loans have a 20% risk to your bank. and so your bank want to make sure they're going to get paid. If you're thinking of a CBILS loan, then it's quite worthwhile talking to us and running through our funding partners, Capitalise. They have a route to put in these claims. Now I'm going to go on to where we are with HMRC's attitude to some of the COVID-19 claims. Certainly over the last few months, we've seen HMRC's enforcement team starting to ramp up their enforcement action against possible abuses. All of these schemes were brought in, and certainly there wasn't time to make them really fraud resistant. Certainly we've heard of some big claims for, obviously through the press, big claims for fraud around the furlough scheme, and HMRC are ramping up their enforcement around that and have already made arrests around that. This is just what I saw in the last 2 days, just to show you the sorts of things that are happening and what could happen. HMRC said 3 men had been arrested at an address in London on suspicion of cheating the public revenue and fraud by false representation, with alleged in respect of the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, which ran in August here. There was 50% off, up to £10 a person. Obviously, these 3 men, if they are doing what HMRC think they're doing, have been putting in fraudulent claims for these £10. And HMRC have gone in and arrested them at the moment. So we don't know how big that would have been, but it could well be. It was a relatively small claim, but if HMRC see these things and they can clearly show their fraud, they're willing to go and chase these down. Another 3 people have been arrested in Birmingham after they were accused of fraudulently obtaining £145,000 through the bounce back loan scheme for companies affected by the pandemic. Here, I mean, £145,000 is a lot of money, but it could just be 3 bounce back loan applications. So HMRC are willing to come down to, albeit a lot of money, 145,000, but they're willing to come down to that to go and make arrests. I think everyone needs to be aware that when you are putting in claims, you do need to put them in honestly, because HMRC look like, once all this is over, it looks like they will go back and run through these claims and make sure they're right. So please make sure you've got all your paperwork in place to support the schemes. Now, I wouldn't imagine any of our clients are defrauding the Eat Out to Help Out scheme or claiming bounce back loans when they're not entitled to them, but clearly some people are. How can we help? Well, here at PJCO, we've been supporting our business clients throughout the furlough period, providing advice and the furlough claims process for free for all of our payroll clients. So anyone who's been doing, we do the payroll for, we provide that for free. We hope you appreciate this, and as I said on Tuesday, we've given some special thanks needs to go out to Daniel and Joe, who've taken on all this extra workload over the last 7 months and worked tirelessly to try and keep your payrolls and your furlough claims going in as quickly as we possibly can. So I'm going to thank them, and when you speak to them next doing your payroll, please thank them, because as I say, they have really worked hard during this time. Where can you find financial support for business during COVID-19? There is one particular link, the link I've got on the screen here, that keeps you up to date with the financial support available for your business. What I would suggest you do is take that link and go and look at it, put it in your browser. When you go to that link, there's the ability to get email updates of anything changing. So if you go and put that in, then you will get the changes as they start to happen. As I say, this week we've probably had 10 different changes that could affect any business. So it is quite important that you keep up to date with these changes. Obviously, here at PJCO, we will keep putting out webinars to tell you, your client portfolio managers will be coming back to you to try and make sure you're claiming all the things you're entitled to. But you can also help yourselves by having a look at that particular page and linking up to the emails, so you can look specifically for your business. Okay, that's the end of our talk for today. Anyone got any queries on the extra funding that's available?